Gates in there. And my Firefly.
Hi, everybody. We are just going to wait a couple minutes to see if we have any more participants.
And thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Great. I see we're getting folks coming in.
Dr. K, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Just looking forward to it. I'm actually, this is a working meeting, right? So lunch meeting. So I just had
a discussion. It's perfect for it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So we can have
good.
We're having a conversation.
Great.
There we go.
If it was the winner, we can call it the fireside chat, but it's too hard for that. So it's the winner side chat.
The way it's spent, you can call it a fireside chat anyway.
I don't think I can argue with that, Mary Jo.
We have a couple more people.
Jennifer Bowles and Dr. Dubiel.
And Brandy.
That's 12:05. Hmm?
Yeah.
Mr. Obafemi, just as we're waiting for people to start, how long is the actual presentation? I know it's more of a discussion and we want to hear people's questions, but in terms of the formal presentation for anybody who's just tuning in, this is your third time this week. So thank you and Amanda for your dedication. So about how long have you approximately?
So the approach, that's a very good question, Dr. Kagari. The approach that we've taken is, instead of presenting the information and then waiting for stakeholders to ask questions, what we've decided to do is, as we present each slide, if there's a need for questions, we will stop and answer those questions.
Great.
So we have about an hour and a half, and we want to pace it as a discussion instead of a presentation and question.
And so what I'm hearing is that would you welcome people to use a chat form as well to put their questions in there?
Absolutely. Okay. And it's taken on average about an hour and a half. Last night we used every bit of an hour and a half because we had a very robust conversation.
Okay.
And yes.
That makes sense.
There's a lot of give and take, sir.
Okay, well, again, thank you on behalf of everyone and for sharing this information. So
thank you, sir.
What do you think? Should we start? We have 12 participants.
One more.
It's exciting.
Let's wait one more minute. Sure. Let me open it.
Amanda, I'm seeing that the chat is disabled. Is there a different format for asking questions?
Let me see. This is actually my first time hosting a Zoom meeting. So
I'm happy to assist. If you want to make me co-host, I can also support you.
how do I do that?
Okay, so let me see here. I'm gonna.
Oh, I found it. Make co-host.
Okay, there you go.
Well, okay, I think we'll just go ahead and start by saying thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I know there's a number of other places you could be having lunch, but you chose to join us, and for that, we appreciate you. And this is the third in a series of community budget workshop that we are having this year to go over the tentative 2026 budget. I am Raphael Obafemi, the Chief Financial Officer for the district, and I'll have my colleague sit next to me here. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Amanda Sitar, and I'm the Director of Finance.
So Ms. Sitar will start the presentation, and I will jump in right behind her.
There we go. So part of the purpose and functions of the budget, it serves as a moral document that reflects the district values, goals, and objectives. It provides spending and taxing authority, complies with all applicable Illinois laws and regulations, and provides essential financial information as required by state, local, and federal agencies. So SD 308 has 5 strategic priorities that you can see here. Priority 1 is future ready. Priority 2 is systems of support. Priority 3 is academics. Priority 4 is wellness. And priority 5 is systems management. Underneath all of those, there's a whole bunch of other things, but we fall into strategic priority number 5, which is resource allocation. So part of that is transparency and engagement, which is why we're doing these meetings. We're trying to offer it different locations, different times of day, and obviously the virtual meeting so people can join as needed. We also implemented a zero-based budgeting. That does not mean that you start at zero. It basically means planning far ahead. What do you know that you're going to be spending for the year? What could maybe wait until next year? What contracts do we have that we have already signed the dotted line to pay this year? So all of those things we meet with budget managers, and they tell us what they need and they tell us what they want. And then we kind of go from there and build the budget from zero. We also want to focus on a common vision and shared accountability. Promoting intentional spending rooted in a unified district vision. So we don't need to be frivolously spending. We want to make sure that every expense that we're making is really going back into the students and helping students succeed. Part of our priority is also transparency. So this is why we are doing these workshops, and not just during this time, but anytime throughout the year. You can always contact us, call us, ask questions, come to board meetings, whatever you think you need to do to better understand our budget or our processes, we welcome that. So here's our budget timeline. It changed a little bit this year. Last year, we were pretty quick in approving our budget by June. However, with funding being unknown and kind of, we didn't really know what was going to happen with federal and state this year. So we wanted to wait to make sure that we actually had a good number. So phase 1, we usually start in November and through January. Phase 2 is when the first drafts are due by those budget managers. So that's when they're bringing us their contracts and saying, like, utilities went up by this much, we're going to have to budget for that. Phase 3 is the phase that we're in currently. We're giving our budget presentations. We will also present to the board on Monday, and we will put the budget on display for 30 days. Phase 4 is adoption, and that happens August and September. So we'll have a public hearing on that as well. We're all here for the same purpose, right? Students. Now, Mr. Obafemi is going to take over and talk about some numbers.
Thank you. So before we go on talking about the numbers, I stated at the beginning of this conversation that our attempt is to have a conversation as opposed to presenting to you and waiting for the end of the presentation for you to ask questions. So what we'd like to reiterate is, as we're presenting each of the slide, if anyone who's listening to us has a question, they can put the question in the chat and we will provide answers to the question as we go along. Okay? We're thinking more of a conversation instead of a delivery and waiting at the end to get answers to questions. So with that being said, the one thing I would like to point out is that of the amount of money that we spend on salaries, personnel costs, fully 95% of that money is actually paid for our staff member who directly support students, who actually on a daily basis, the work that they do touch students. So of the 2292, approximately 2,300 employees that we have. Yeah. So the budget for personnel in 26, in fiscal year 26, which is the budget year that we're talking about right now, there's a decrease of 1.35% in FTE compared to what happened last fiscal year. And then those 95% that I mentioned earlier, those are your building administrators, your teachers, your support staff, your TAs, your custodians, and maintenance people make up that 95% plus of our employees that actually work directly with students. Now, of the salary expenses, which you will see later on in the presentation, of approximately $195 million, only 1.79% of those salary expenses can be directly traced back to administrators in district office. I know there are conversations that goes on in the district a lot of time. I get emails and I get phone calls sometimes where a committee member talks about the big amount of money that we spend on district administrators. So relative to the salary budget, the amount that we spend on administrators is very, very low compared to the average in the state and in a neighboring district. The average tends to be between 4 to 5% of our salary expenditure that goes to district administrator. In our case, it's less than 2%. So to kind of build on that a little bit, of the 95% of employees who directly support students, we are talking about principals, building administrators, assistant principal. We're talking about educators who actually teach our kids. We're talking about teaching assistants who assist our educators and also provide supports to our students in the classroom. Our bus drivers, our bus monitors who transport our kids back and forth. We're talking about the office staff who are located in the 23 school buildings that we operate. We're talking about our staff members who work with our students to ensure that they get fed breakfast and lunch during the school day. And we're also talking about custodians and maintenance staff member and librarian who make sure students have access to reading material in our media centers. So these folks actually directly work with our students. 95% of the salary expenditure is directed to that. Now, the 4.7% I mentioned earlier, 1.79% of that is district administrator. The rest of them are support staff who are actually located in the district administrative building. Those are your HR specialists. These are the folks that we actually need to go out and help us recruit employees, our teachers that are teaching our kids, the bookkeeper who actually record revenues that we receive as a district, accounts payable personnel who pay the bills that we actually incur, with all the vendors that provide the services, textbooks, and electricity utilities. Those are the roles that the accounts payable folks play. Without them, we can't really carry out the work that we do. Benefit coordinator are the staff member who actually go out and procure health insurance, dental insurance for our staff members. Payroll specialists, those are our colleagues that ensure that twice a month, our teachers, administrators, our support staff gets paid. And then we have a purchase agent who actually goes out and conduct the RFP and make sure that we get the absolute best pricing for the services and the product that we buy as a district. And then we have a claims analyst who is responsible for making sure money owed to us by the state, the federal government, or the district partners actually pay to us. So just to give you an idea of the makeup, sure, we have a question here. What amount does that 1.79 equal? It's approximately $4.9 million. That's approximately $4.9 million, or we can round it up to $5 million out of the $195 million budget that we have. So I'm going to talk about the staffing changes that is included, that we're proposing in the fiscal year 26 budget. These are essentially our educators who directly work with our students. So as you can see here, we have some increases that amounts to 18 FTE. And this is driven essentially by three key factors. One key factor is enrollment. We have increased enrollment. And of the increased enrollment, a big amount of it is tied to our students who need special ed services. When a student comes to us and they need special ed services, and that is encapsulated in the IEP, we're required by law to provide those services for them. So we have to actually go out and hire the staff required to do that. And then we also have increase in bilingual, multilingual learners. And we have to now go out and provide the support needed by those learners. So those are the two critical areas that accounts for the increase of 18 FTE that is being shown here. I receive another question here. Does the 1.79 administration budget include the most recent pay increases? Yes, it does. So the next.
Yep.
So we just reviewed the licensed employees, our employees who work directly in the classroom with our students. Now, we wanted to show the changes that have been proposed in fiscal year 26 as it relates to staffing changes and assignment. What you will see is that we've been working really hard to create a level of efficiency in positions that do not directly touch our kids in the classroom. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to reduce by 49.10 FTE in the amount of staff that we are providing support to our students. And I think that is significant. It shows that what the board is indicated in their preference of making sure that the district is ran with efficiency and with a mind of looking at cost and whenever possible, reducing cost without negatively impact instruction in the classroom. And we've taken that to heart, and we've actually taken the position to implement that in how we develop this budget. So we're going to talk about actual numbers that are included in the budget. So there are two components that makes up the budget. We have the overall budget, which includes such things as debt services, bond and interest. That is to pay for bonds that were issued for capital projects to build additional buildings. And the cost of servicing that debt, if you will, to paying the bondholders who actually provided us the money that we needed to do those capital upgrades and construction, comes out to approximately $37 million a year. And in addition to that $37 million, we have the operation budget, which is 278.5. And that is the money that we actually use for day-to-day operation. The money that pays for the salaries of district employee and additional day-to-day utilities, water, those types of things, those are paid out of the operating budget.
You have another question?
Yes, I have another question here. The question is regarding school support staff, specifically paraprofessional. Are their position covered under the IDA funding? So the best way to answer that is it all depends, right? IDA funding, Individual with Education Act, that's a special ed funding stream. So if the support that they provide is related to special education, some of those expenditures are actually paid for out of IDA funding, but there's not enough IDA funding to even pay for all special ed support staff. Some of those costs are actually borne by local funds, which is essentially taxpayer funded property taxes, as well as state funding that we get in the form of EBF and mandated categorical funding. So in addition to the 278.5 million that I mentioned, we budget another 1,270,000 for capital projects. And then there's, I mentioned earlier, the $37 million for bond and interest. So the revenue highlights as it stands right now. Property tax makes up the largest majority of the funding that we use to operate the school district. And for fiscal year 26, that is projected to increase by $5 million or 4%. CPPRT, that stands for Corporate Property Replacement Tax. This fund was actually one that replaced what used to be assessed by local municipality. It used to be local municipality before the new Illinois Constitution. They will actually each tax businesses that are located in their jurisdiction. And their tax is dependent on the equipment that this business used to generate business. Once the Illinois Constitution, the current Illinois Constitution went into effect, that responsibility was actually given to the Illinois Department of Revenue. And the Department of Revenue collects that money from all businesses located in different municipalities and then allocate that amount to taxing body based on the percentage that they receive back when the CPPRT, before the CPPRT was centralized. And so the amount that we're expecting for that is actually going down by 1.6 million or close to 50%. And the reason for that is right after the pandemic, there was a pent-up demand for things, for services and products. And what happened then is there was a ramp up in companies' production. So there was an increase in the amount of taxes that were collected by the Illinois Department of Revenue from businesses. So we had a 3-year period of really increased tax collection from businesses. But now we know that period is past. So that is what accounts for the big change from fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 26. So what is happening in fiscal year 26 is that the collection of that corporate property replacement tax is gone down to pre-COVID, which is why we are receiving close to 50% less than we did last year and the previous 2 years. EBF is the second largest source of funding. This is the funding that the state of Illinois actually appropriates to fund education. This funding stream replaced the general state aid that used to be the way the state funds education. And I will talk some more about EBF, but what I can say is EBF went into effect in 2018. And at that time, we were tier 1. The funding system broke school districts into different tiers. Tier 1s are the school districts who need the most help from the state because of the fact that they didn't have as much local wealth, which essentially translates to ability to access property taxes. Tier 2 are the districts that are next in line. Tier 3 are the districts that are they're doing better than Tier 2 and Tier 1. And Tier 4 are the most affluent district, if you will, with abundant local wealth. So what was determined back in 2017 when EBF was adopted to go into effect in 2018 was that those districts that were tier 4, they would never get any more money from the state than what they got in 2017, but they would never lose any more money unless there's a significant decrease in the number of student enrollment. So we happen to be in tier 1. And the reason being that even though we have a high tax rate, we still needed more money to be able to provide adequate education to our students. So since 2018 to really 2020, we got significant increase in state allocation to us through EBF. Now in 2021, because of COVID, we essentially received the same amount that we received in 2020, in 2021. But then after COVID was over, in 2022, we ramped up the amount that we received from the state for EBF. So we stayed in tier 1. 2023, same thing. 2024, same thing. Last year in 2025, we received an additional 7.7 million that we did in 2024. So what happened is this year, we moved up from tier 1 to tier 2. Now, what that resulted in a significant reduction in the amount of contribution that we received from the state. What the state and the driving factor for us moving from tier 1 to tier 2 was the assessment by the state that the value of property in our community is gone up significantly, which is what's classified as local wealth. So from the state's point of view, we have the ability to ask a community member to contribute more in form of property taxes compared to districts who are currently who are still in tier 1. So what that did is instead of receiving $7.7 million more than we did in 2025, we only slated to receive just 1.46 million, which is a significant decrease. So essentially, we're receiving just 1.3% increase in EBF in 2026 compared to what we received in 2025. The other state funding that we receive are what is called mandated categorical funds. Those tend to be more reimbursement. Those are reimbursement for transporting our special education students, our regular education students, our orphanage, and other funds that we're eligible for that the state reimburses for. But what is interesting about that is the state doesn't guarantee that we will get the funds that are in mandated categorical funds. The state has the right and the ability to prorate whatever it is that is appropriated by the governor, depending on the revenue that comes in from the state. I see another question just came up regarding school support staff, specifically paraprofessionals.
I think that's about that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I covered that already. Sorry.
There was one about, how does it affect our district going from a tier 1 to a tier 2?
I think I addressed that with the allocation. Mm-hmm. And then the last revenue highlight that I want to touch on is federal funding. And we know the current administration, there have been changes in how they've decided to fund education. The amount of money that is allocated to us comes from IDEA that I talked about earlier, which specifically funds special education. And then we get Title funds. Title I, which is for low-income students. Title II, which is teacher professional development. Title III, which is bilingual education, multilingual education, and the other titles there. So based on what we've been allocated today, we're seeing a minimum $600,000 increase in what we received in 2025. And now that amount can either go up or it can go down. We're still waiting for additional information from the federal government. So we just wanted to put a chart here that allows us to be able to share what revenue looks like in fiscal year 26 projected to what was budgeted in 2025. And as I mentioned earlier, what we see here is there's an increase in local funds. Now, local fund is not just property taxes. There's property taxes there. There's CPPRT, which I talked about before, corporate property replacement taxes. There are fees that we charge a student. There are revenue that we get from the sales of food that we sell to our students. And other fees, rental fees, for example, for entities that rent our buildings to use. Those would be other local funds in addition to property taxes. Now, someone just asked a question. For other state funded projects, what allocation goes to transportation operation and depreciation? That's an excellent question. So the way the transportation reimbursement works is, we actually don't get a dollar for dollar reimbursement. In fiscal year 2025, the state prorated the reimbursement that we get from regular education. Every dollar that we spend, we only get 79 cents back for the regular education. Every dollar that we spend for special education for students with IEP, we receive 71 cents back for every dollar, which is 71%. Now in 2026, with the budget that was approved by the state, that proration actually went down. Whereas in 2025, we received 79 cents on a dollar. In 2026, we will only receive 69 cents on a dollar for regular education and 61 cents on a dollar for special education. So state revenue this year is projected to be up just by 2.59. That will be a combination of EBF and the other mandated categorical funds. As I mentioned earlier, we're expecting a reduction of over 600,000 in federal allocation, which amounts to a reduction of 6.58%. So total revenue of the three major revenue sources, we're looking at a 4.35% increase compared to what was budgeted in 2025. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but we wanted to just show this pictorially, which is that the largest source of funding is local funds. It makes up 53.34%, followed by state revenue, 43.2%, and then the federal government is 3.1%. And we decided it would be a good idea to even go deeper and shows by a pie chart that shows by the different sources of revenue. As I've mentioned over time, property taxes makes up the largest predictable source of revenue, followed by EBF from the state government, and then followed that by other state revenue. And then the distant third is the federal revenue that we get, and then CPPRT, which is projected to be $1.7 million in 26. So the flip side of that, we talked about revenue. We wanted to show what expenditure looks like. So expenditure, what it looks like in, I always, before I address that, I always tell everyone that when I talk to people and they ask me how we spend the district's money, I tell them we're in the people business. The majority of the expenditures that we have as a district goes into people because we educate students. So we hire a lot of teachers. So by that measure, close to 84% of the expenditure that we have goes towards paying for salaries and the associated benefits. So we're in the people's business. And that is what is reflected here. So compared to what was budgeted in 25, salaries are going up, are projected to go up by 13.77%. That has to do with increases. Some of it are driven by contract that was signed with a labor union. And employee benefits, those are insurance, health insurance, as well as dental and vision insurance. Those are projected to go up by 10.32%.
I have two questions.
Yes. Some of the other revenue from the state and local. So the other revenue, I think I addressed that before. As it relates to local, I will talk about the sale of food that we serve in a cafeteria to our students. We are talking about fees that we charge our students, technology fee. That would be one. Another one would be athletic fees. So those are the fees that we charge a student, makes up the other local. And then another one that I mentioned earlier is the rental of our facility to third-party entities who will use that facility. We charge them for that too. That makes up, we account for that in local funds. As it relates to state funding, those are mostly the mandated categorical funds that I mentioned before. Reimbursement for transportation, orphanage, those are really the key. So, and then early childhood allocation for a preschool program. That's another source of mandated categorical fund from the state. How is the Medicaid funding impacting the federal budget for the district? That's a very good question. Now, we don't have clarity about how that is going to impact us moving forward. We currently, in the past, I shouldn't say currently, in the past, we've gotten reimbursement for students who are eligible for Medicaid, who are also in a classified special ed, who receive services from our staff members. They receive services from a staff member, they're eligible for Medicaid, and they also have an IEP. We used to get reimbursed for administrative component as well as fee for service. But with the way things are going with the federal government right now, we don't have any clarity about what is going to be the fate of the reimbursement that we've gotten in the past that we depend on as a district to help defray the cost of special education. So I wish I could provide more information, but we don't have that information right now. We've asked the questions and we're waiting to get additional information to share and to use in developing our budget on a more firm footing.
Right.
So as you see, these are the other expenditures. If you could go back, the other expenditure. And what we've done is the board has directed us to be efficient in the way we run the district. And we've taken that to heart and we've been working hard to do that. As you can see in purchase services, we've managed to come up with a 20% reduction in purchase services. We've managed to come up with 2.54% reduction in supplies and material, 25.63 in capital outlay, and non-capital equipment, clearly 50.63 in reduction. Now, the increases that you see in other objects are mostly related to out of district and related special education expenditure, which quite frankly, we don't have much in the way of flexibility. If a student is eligible for special education and needs special education services that we cannot provide in district, they go to a special therapeutic school, we have to pay the cost of providing those services to the student and their family. So we thought it was important to do a picture, a pie chart that illustrates what we just talked about. And I think I pointed this out earlier, that close to 84% of the expenditure of the operating budget, the $278 million that we spend, goes into salary and related costs. Only 16.3% is for non-personnel related. And of that, it includes the cost of food service. We have a third-party agreement with Airmen to provide food service to our students. We have attorneys that we hire to represent the interest of the district on legal issues. We have audit firms that audit our book as required by the federal government, by the state, and also by a district at the end of every year. We have contracted transportation who provide special ed transportation, Durham, as well as Subtran. We pay them out of that 16.3. We also pay for utilities out of that 16.3. We pay for light, like you do at home. We pay for gas bill, and we run 25 buildings with an average square foot of 20,000. So you can imagine how much we pay utility cost, water, electricity, and light. So it adds up. We also pay, like most business and organizations do, we have a pretty significant property and casualty insurance bill, and we pay for workers' comp, which is required by state statute. And then from this 16.3, it's also where we find funds to do facility maintenance and repairs that our buildings need. So this is a conversation that I've been having with a lot of our stakeholders, our community members. I get calls sometimes from our taxpayers. They look at their bills and they want to know why the district's portion is so high. Now, one of the reasons why our portion is so high, and I will admit we have a higher tax rate relative to a lot of other districts, is that if you remember, for the folks who were here back in the early 2000s, Kendall County was the fastest growing county in the country. And there was a question asked about how are we identifying and securing grant to help address area of deficit? Absolutely. Over the last 2 years, the board is charged us to look for ways to get alternate revenue to augment what we currently get from local funds, from the state and the federal government. And in deciding on whom we hire in the finance office, what we've done, we've actually decided to divide our hiring into two classes of employees. We look at what we call cost centers. Those are employees that cost us money. And then we look at profit centers. Those are employees, even though we spend money to hire them, but they bring more money relative to how much it costs us, which is why we hire a grant manager in the district, grant director, and also a claims manager. And if I can address the claims manager, we have relationships with different school districts. We educate kids from other school districts in the district, and in the past, we did not develop a binding intergovernmental agreement where we spell out that for educating the kids, you owe us X amount of money. And what we've done right now is we've developed an IGA that we have the attorney develop, and we get the entity school district where those kids originate from. We get them to sign it. We get them to have their board approve it. And we also make sure that our claims analyst then follows up and invoice those school districts, and we collect those revenue that are owed to us. So we're saying IGA stands for Intergovernmental Agreement. It's actually a contract, if you will, between governmental entities. So it's more for governmental contract compared to a commercial contract that most private entities we sign. It's strictly between two governmental entities. That's what it stands for. So just by doing that last year, we were able to bring in about $800,000 in additional revenue by just being on it. Another thing that we're doing is we transport kids sometimes who are out of district, but because of their personal circumstances, they attend school here. By law, we allow to actually build a district where that is their home district for the cost of transportation. In the past, we were not on it, but starting the last couple of years, working with our claims analyst, we actually have been doing that. We've been more aggressive in going after those districts and saying, you owe us money, you have a responsibility to transport your kids. We're doing it on your behalf, you gotta pay us back. Plus an additional amount in processing costs. Last year, I can tell you a story of an out-of-state district where the district actually refused to pay us. And we reached out to the district, to the State Department of Education for that district. And we appealed to them, and they supported us. And they contacted that out-of-state district, and they said, you gotta pay what you owe. So we were able to collect that money. So what we are doing, to answer the question, we're doing everything we can to enhance revenues that are owed to us, and also look at additional grants and foundation funding to be able to augment our revenue and get more money without going back to our taxpayers. But I just need to be very honest in saying that there's a limit to how much we can do to be able to have significant impact on the revenue that we need, the size of our district. But we are doing work on that. So I was talking about the long-term debt. So back in early 2000, Kendall County, the fastest growing county in the country, and at that time there was a need for 12 additional schools all at once. Now in the state of Illinois, the only way a district can build a school is to issue bonds. And at that time, we didn't have the ability to be able to issue bonds. So the only way we can issue bonds is to do a referendum. And the amount of funding that we actually need for that referendum was so big to build 12 schools in a short time. We have to appeal to our state legislature to pass a law that allows us to be able to do that referendum. That referendum was conducted and was passed in 2006. And for $500 million, and I mean that, $500 million to build those schools, it passed. Fortunately, we didn't issue all $500 million. We only issued $250 million. And the proceeds of that we used to build 12 schools at that time. And most of the schools were built and completed around 2006 to 2008. Now, the cost of borrowing that money is what we're paying in terms of long-term debt now. So what happened is, initially we borrowed $250 million. We've actually made progress in paying that down. The amount that we owe right now is what is showing us the principal on the deck here, $185.5 million from the original $250 million. And the interest for that debt now owed is $88.9 million for a total balance of $274.5 million. So the debt service, the cost of paying those bondholders to paying down the debt in what we call bond and interest is the $36.9 million that I mentioned earlier. So we wanted to provide an overview of what a tentative budget looks like for this school year. So as you see here, we broke it down by the different operating funds. The ed funds, we would do okay. We will have a surplus of just over $1 million. And for the operating funds, which is operation and maintenance, funds that are used for the operation of our building facilities, we'll have a projected deficit of $1.2 million. But that is not concerning because we have a fund balance in that fund of about $10 million. So at the end of the year, we have the ability to absorb that deficit from our fund balance. The next fund that we have is transportation. That is where the troubling part is. As you can see, we're projecting revenue of $10.9 million, but we're slated to spend $14.3 million. And we have a true deficit of $3.3 million. Transportation has been a significant pain point for the district. And we do not have a fund balance in transportation to be able to carry this deficit. As a matter of fact, at the end of fiscal year 2025, we ended the year with a negative fund balance in transportation of close to $5 million. And you cannot end a year with a negative fund balance. So somehow we have to find the $5 million from other funds to be able to transfer into a transportation fund. And over the since the pandemic, the cost of transportation has gone up and the transportation fund is ran a systemic deficit. We did a projection going back over the next 5 years from now to 2030. And what we came up with is by 2030, we will have a projected deficit in the transportation fund of 26 million plus. That is not sustainable. There's no way we can pay for that. So what we've been trying to do is come up with ways to manage the transportation fund. And before I talk about that, I want to really quickly talk about what brought on this huge increase in transportation costs. It actually was brought on to a large extent by the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the 72 passenger buses that we bought then, we can buy those buses for $80,000, $83,000, $85,000 a bus. Those same buses today, because of inflation and shortages of parts, we have to pay $165,000 for the same buses. So that's a 50% increase in cost. That's number one. The other part is that before the pandemic, our bus drivers made an average of $12 to $13 an hour. Now, and that was possible because the folks who drove buses for us back then, they were retirees. They had a pension from another job. They just wanted to be able to, to drive buses and provide support for the district that they lived in. So they worked 2 hours in the morning to drop off our students, and they worked 2 hours in the afternoon to pick up our kids and took them back home. But we know that a lot of them were negatively impacted by COVID. A lot of them got sick, and we know we lost a lot of our senior citizens. So we have fewer senior citizens who are willing to drive buses than we did before. And it wasn't just us. It's all the school districts, not just in Illinois, but all over the country. So there's a significant shortage of bus drivers right now. So what is that to happen, which is what happened in economics, in the marketplace. If you have a lowest supply of any particular product, you have to raise prices to be able to attract people into the marketplace. And that's what we've had to do. We've had to raise the amount of money that we pay our bus drivers. So the average salary that we pay now is $23 an hour. Just think about it. We're going from $12 to $13 an hour to now $23 an hour. And it gets even worse. It gets better or worse depending on how you're looking at it, I should say that. So we're paying more. So in order to also attract people now, we have to offer them more hours. So instead of them working 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, and just working 4 hours, we've had to actually increase the number of hours they work to 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, and in between to be able to provide them something to do. So we use them for other things in the midday. So they get 6 hours. Now, the issue with providing folks 6 hours of work every single day, now you're required by law, the Affordable Care Act says, if someone is going to be working 6 hours or more every day, you have to offer them health insurance. So we're now offering health insurance, which we didn't have to do for part-time employees. Additionally, we're having to also provide pension. If you employ anyone in the state of Illinois, governmental entity, and they work 6 hours or more, you have to contribute to their pension. So if you add up the hourly cost of transportation, the cost of buses, the wage rate, the associated benefits for health insurance, as well as pension, there's a significant increase to transportation. And then it gets more even interesting for us. We transport 15,000 kids. And all the kids that we transport, we actually are not required to transport them. As I mentioned earlier, even if we did everything right, we spend $1, we can only expect to get 69 cents on the dollar when the state pays us. And even for that amount, that's 69 cents for the state to pay us, those kids that we transport have to fall into 3 main categories. You have to have an IEP with special education, with transportation included in the IEP. They have to live in a designated hazardous route, or they have to live at longer than 1.5 miles. Those are the only 3 categories of kids that we even get that 69 cents on the dollar for. But historically, we bused everyone who wanted buses, regardless of whether they fell into the category that we will be reimbursed for. So what we've been doing, we've been subsidizing the cost of transportation with other funds in the district that we don't have. So we have to do something different to make sure that operationally we run the transportation services more efficiently, or quite frankly, we'll go broke as a district. So we're doing our part. In addition to making sure that we follow the guidelines set by the state, we did a hazardous route study earlier late last year, where we hired an engineer to do a study. Once we did that, it was brought before the Board of Education for approval. Once the board approved that, we sent it to Illinois Department of Transportation for certification. And now we can actually receive reimbursement for those kids who live in designated hazardous route. Another thing that I want to share with you in the way of operational steps that we have taken to realize efficiency in transportation is that previously, every 5 years, we released about 75 buses, and we'll pay about $12 million for those buses. And after the 5-year comes up, we'll give those buses back to the bus company. And on average, those buses are 22,000 miles on it, which to me is a pretty low mileage for a bus. So what we've decided to do with the lease agreement that we reached this year is that we decided that we were going to do a lease to own instead of just renting the buses. So we lease to own those buses, and after 5 years, we'll keep those buses for an additional 5 years. So we'll keep the buses for 10 years. So instead of spending about $12 million every 5 years, we will spend $12 million in 10 years. And related to that too, we've gone out and trained our mechanic. It used to be that when our buses broke down, we sent back to the bus company for warranty services. And then we will have to wait for them to bring those buses back. What we've done right now, we've trained our staff to be able to actually do our work here in the district, and we will be able to bill the warranty company for reimbursement. We'll actually make some money there. I'm going to stop right now and answer a couple of questions that have been posed.
1 second. So Dr. Kelgati wanted us to talk about a question regarding opening the option for parents and guardians to pay for transportation. We wanted to say that that is not something that has been opened up. It is a consideration that we might bring to the board, but it hasn't been approved or brought to the board yet.
And the reason being that when we schedule our transportation, our buses, what we have to do first is by law, we have to provide transportation to our students who are required by state to be provided transportation. Those 3 kids, group of kids that I mentioned, special ed student with transportation in the IEP, students who live in designated hazardous route, and students who live beyond 1.5 miles. By law, we have to route them first. So we are trying to do that now to see what kind of capacity we have. After we are done routing them, we would then wait till October. And then in October, we will know what capacity we have to take on discretionary transportation services. And then what we'll do, we'll charge for those. That's the reason why we cannot provide that information right now.
That was it. Brenna just, so one of our communications team members, Brenna, just sent a link to a form. If you have any questions that you did not want to put in the chat, or if you think of anything else that you might want to ask us, please go ahead and put it in the form.
So I'm going to talk now about IMRF Social Security. You see there's a projected deficit of $1 million. That is not a concern because the way the law is written is we only supposed to request the money that we need for IMRF and Social Security. We're not supposed to warehouse additional money than what we need. As it stands right now, we have a balance in the fund of just $3 million. So that will be able to cover that $1 million projected deficit without any problem. We're not supposed to do what is called excess accumulation. So we'll be able to pay for that. So the only real troubling deficit that we're seeing in our projected 2026 budget is transportation.
Yep, it takes a minute.
So, thank you. So we wanted to just wrap up by talking about some significant concern that we have as a district that keeps us up at night. And we thought it was worthwhile to share with our community in the scheme of transparency. The one significant thing that we're concerned about is funding from the state. As we know, the state of Illinois' funding is very shaky. As I mentioned earlier, we depend on the state for over 40% in revenue, and we know the state is not a reliable partner. And the funding that they provide us is not adequate to what their responsibility, and it's not equitable. As you can see below, we don't get enough money for early childhood. We don't get enough money for special education by law. When a student shows up, needs education, special education services, we have to provide those services. And those special education services are not inexpensive. And another thing I mentioned, we just talked about that. I don't want to belabor the point. Transportation, special and regular ed transportation. The state does not live up to his end of the bargain. Rising costs is another thing that we have concern about because of rising inflation. Salary is one of it. And one thing that is driving the increase in salaries is that there's a shortage of available staff who wants to work in education. We are competing we're competing with our neighboring district for good candidate in education. I mean, we have neighbors, Plainfield, we have Yorkville, we have Aurora, the two Aurora, we have Naperville. We're competing for the same caliber of candidate. So if we want to be able to hire, keep, retain people, we have to be willing to pay what is competitive. So that is something that we have no option but to be able to do. The cost of transportation, as I mentioned earlier, is going up. The cost of utility is going up. If you look at your light bill and your gas bill lately, you will see that. As a matter of fact, late last month, we received notification from one of our electricity supplier saying that for the rest of the year, the cost of electricity is going up by 22% because of limited capacity. But fortunately for us, we had a contract that we had locked in already for the balance of the year. We wouldn't be impacted directly by that. But I just wanted to illustrate that as it stands right now, revenue is not catching up with the real cost of running the school district. We just wanted to share that with you. And as we know, as we mentioned before, the state is uncertain. Even if they allocate money, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will see the cash. The comptroller of the state is always juggling to figure out, who am I going to pay today? Am I going to pay Peter? Am I going to pay Paul? We depend on that to be able to have the cash that we need to run the district. And significantly, we mentioned this, the federal government funding. We don't have a clear picture right now of the funds that we'll get from the federal government, not just this year, but moving forward. If you remember back on July 1st, the federal government issued a notice that it was freezing allocation for school districts. That included $240 million in K-12 grant in the state of Illinois. About a week ago, the Fed decided again they're going to unfreeze it, but we still don't know when we'll receive the allocation from the federal government. And I can't overstate this. The only reliable source of funding that we have as a district is the property tax that you all as taxpayers that you pay. And as significant as that is, and I cannot understate it, it only contributes to about 120 million of the 278.5 operating budget. So it's tricky. So we have to do everything we can to be very judicious, to be efficient about how we run the district, but there's a limit to what we can do in doing that without impacting the quality of education of our students.
Sorry, I hit a button.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Does anybody have any other questions?
If there are no questions, I just want to say on behalf of the Board of Education, as well as our colleagues here, We really want to thank the folks who took the time to show up and listen to the 26 community budget workshop. We need your input. We need your support. We serve you. We appreciate the contribution that you make to our district, in the significant contribution in the form of property taxes and the fees that you pay, which makes it possible for us to provide the world-class education that I know we're committed to providing to our kids. That's a very good question. Someone asked the question, given this increase in financial demand, what special education, what strategies can we implement to manage and plan for rising costs? Now, that is a very good question. We have been working together. We spent a lot of time this year, before this budget year, to look at different ways that we can assign students to special education. One thing that we did that we think will result in savings, we actually created a position of special education AP that were assigned to schools in the district. And what we believe, and the evidence will bear us out, that if we have a good infrastructure for dealing with special education services on the front end, then we can reduce costs of having to fight parents in court, in mediation on the back end. So by having a dedicated AP, we work with our special ed staff, it helps us to control costs on the front end. Another thing that we're doing is we are working with the assistant superintendent for diverse services and other colleagues in the district. We've shifted the way we deploy special education services to do it in a more efficient way instead of just ad hoc. That's another thing that we're doing. But quite frankly, there's a limit to the amount of things we can do to save money in education. When a student comes to us, they have an IEP. By law, state and federal law, we have to provide the services that we request. If we don't provide it, the parent can go out and hire an attorney. And if the attorney prevails, we have to then provide the service retroactively. We also have to pay the cost of the attorney who represent the parent. So it's a very tight situation. We're not the only district that is faced with this, but it's a significant burden if we don't get the required support that we need from the state and the federal government. Just to be clear, we pride ourselves in providing whatever support our students need and to do it in our district. We pride ourselves in doing that. It would just be helpful to get some financial support from our partners, from the federal government and the state. Yes, someone asked the question, the FTE shows a 0.9, and those are the APs, and I believe the majority of them are the special ed AP that were deployed. Unfortunately, someone asked the question, do we have an opportunity to limit the outplacement of SPED students and create savings for the district? Absolutely. Our first option, whenever possible, is to educate our students right here in the district. We know we can do it better. We want to keep them with their core of colleagues, of their friends, that we want to keep them here in the district. We want to educate our kids here, but we know the varying level of services that our students need. And in some extreme cases, we are not able to provide those services here in district because some of the requirement is so varied for what we see we have to place here out of district. And that is something of last resort. Whenever possible, we want to educate our students here. We know it's the equitable, it's the fair things to do to educate them here. It's also financially, it's prudent to do that. So does it not include the increase in district level administration? There were no district level administration increase. What we've done is the positions that are in district, what we did, we reshuffled, if you will, of positions. We didn't add any additional position in the district.
Yeah, so some went from DAC
Right.
to the
Right.
schools. We had teachers on special assignments who moved to different AP positions and lots of different things. We put them into the schools. Going back to that one question about transportation, we have always potentially offered paid transportation to some parents who don't qualify for eligible transportation, but that's based on our capacity to do so. So it's not like if we don't have the buses or the means to do that, we can't do that. So that's why I said it's something that's still in the works.
And now the question just came up, how many outplay students are there in the district? This is not information that I have on the tip of my mind right now, but we're happy to send it out to share that information with our community and stakeholders. We will get that information out. The same thing with the outplay students. We can get that count out, working with our diverse learning partners.
Does that mean SPED students who need private placement or?
Yes, who were placed out of district
Yeah.
as well as, If there are no additional questions, yes, we'll be happy to provide that information to you, diverse learning partners. If there are no additional questions, we want to thank you again for joining us. And we ask you if you have any additional questions that you could think about, even after a virtual presentation today, please feel free to reach out. And I think, engage stakeholders makes us all smarter and better and make it possible to serve our students and our community better. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kelgati, and thank you for people in our district and on our board who were able to attend today and other people in the community. This was our most, we will be posting a copy of this recorded presentation. Communications will do that. I believe they put it on the YouTube video and on our website.
Now, the presentation will also be on Board Doc. It will be part of the board document for Monday's meeting. It will also be presented again at the board meeting on Monday. A copy of it will be on board document, and the presentation will present the same presentation at the board meeting on Monday during the regularly scheduled board meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.